Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Monday. Thank you all for being here tonight on this Monday. Welcome to You Were Never Too Much, the biology of the neurodivergent brain. I hope you're in the right spot because that's what we're talking about tonight. And I want to start off tonight by saying something that listen, this is a safe space. So if you need to turn off your camera, if you feel like leaving, guess what? There's a replay. Okay. So do what feels comfortable to you. We will have a Q&A at the end. There's a Q&A button. So put any of your comments or your questions in there and we'll get to that. Okay. And we're going to just take a deep breath and we're going to dive right in. I will say that I'm going to talk about a lot of things tonight. So I just want us all to start with a clean slate. And I want to start with this anxiety, overwhelm, emotional intensity that came out of nowhere, exhaustion that a good night's sleep didn't fix. And underneath all of that, this quiet story that we've been carrying for a very long time. The story that somehow we're too much, too sensitive, too intense, too complicated, and that if we could just try a little bit harder, be a little bit more disciplined, we'd finally be able to have it together like everyone else does. Okay? If that sounds like you're in the right place. Okay? Because that was me. It still is me sometimes. Here's what I've come to believe, both as a physician and from my own neurodivergent journey. We aren't broken. Okay? We were actually never broken. We were just never given the right explanation about what is going on in our brains. Okay. And we're going to start that conversation tonight. So, who am I? I'm Dr. Sarah. I'm a board certified physician, but I'm also a woman who has spent years being handed explanations and diagnoses that didn't fit. So, I promise you that this isn't just clinical for me, it's very, very personal. So, I thank you for joining me tonight. And I want to take you through what we're going to go through tonight. So let's talk about what it's going to look like. Tonight, my goal is to give you a map, the why. Why so many neurodivergent women get treated for anxiety or depression or burnout or just hormones. Well, our brains underneath all of that never get recognized. And I'm going to be honest with you, this isn't a whole plan, right? This is a map. A map is not the same thing as the walk, okay? But I want to say this. You can't build a plan on the wrong explanation. And I think that's what's been happening to so many of us, unfortunately. So tonight, we're going to start the right explanation. And that's where we're going to start, okay? Picture this. What if it was never a character flaw? Okay, sit with that for a second because everything that we discussed tonight is going to come back to that. All right, we're going to look at why ADHD and autism can look completely different in girls and women than the picture that most people carry in their heads. How hormones and big transition of midlife can quietly change our ability to cope. And why masking, that invisible effort to look like everything is fine, eventually stops working, like literally just stops and why so much of the traditional wellness advice that we're handed keeps failing us. And finally, what it actually means to work with your brain instead of constantly fighting against it. That's the map. That's the layout for tonight, okay? And we're going to start at the beginning. I remember if you're just joining us, we are going to have a Q&A at the end so you can put your questions there. But let's start at the beginning, okay? Here's a story that I see over and over and over and over again in my office. Okay. And I also want to caveat this with if you are a neurodivergent woman, maybe you have the diagnosis, maybe you don't, maybe you think you may be, but there is some portion of our journey from when we were kids to now that we have medical trauma, and that is real. We've been in rooms where we've been dismissed, our feelings not validated. And I want to highlight that because midlife, that is an added complexity layer to what's happening to us in midlife. The fact that it is hard for most of us, not all of us, but most of us to trust the system that missed us to begin with or that has dismissed us for so long. Okay. So this is what I see over and over again when they finally get to my office. Okay. A woman has gone to her doctor, right? What do we say? We're exhausted. We're anxious. We can't focus the way we used to. We feel like we're failing at all of the things that are supposed to be simple and we've been able to maintain. And then we walk out with what? A diagnosis maybe of anxiety, depression, stress. Okay, how many people have heard that? Or it's just hormones and normal aging. Here's the thing. None of those things are necessarily wrong, right? We may genuinely have anxiety. We may genuinely be a little depressed. Okay. It may be stress. Okay. And most of the time, it is hormones compounded on all of those. But what happens? They're treating the smoke. And no one is asking about the brain underneath it. No one is connecting the underwiring of our brains. So let me tell you why the brain gets missed, especially in us women. So, for decades, the entire picture of ADHD and autism was built around boys and men. Think about it. That hyperactive little boy, right, who's running around in school, can't sit still, picking at friends, interrupting the teacher, right? That's what the picture of ADHD looks like. And then for autism, a very narrow, specific idea of what that autism picture looks like. That picture became the standard, right? It became what everyone was trained to look at. But we know, and research knows, that this is extremely different. Neurodivergence looks extremely different in girls and in women. It's quieter. It's more internal, right? And it's much easier to mistake for something else. Those of you in this room may have experienced this, but if you're a late diagnosis, especially of autism, there is a statistic that you over half of autistic women are misdiagnosed sometime in their life with a mood disorder. That's powerful because they're getting diagnosed with something that the treatment doesn't even help what's really going on. ADHD in girls isn't that girl running and jumping off the walls, right? It's maybe busy, racing mind that won't switch off, chronic overwhelm, right? A lifelong struggle with time and organization and follow through. And autism in women and girls can look like insane empathy and sensitivity, deep absorbing focus on things that they love, she loves, and real exhaustion after social interaction. A lifetime spent quietly studying other people to figure out how to act normal. Okay. I don't know if any of you identify with this. I do. But so what happens, right? The brain differences stay invisible. And only the side effects get treated, right? So they don't see us. We're not running around poking our neighbor and not sitting down, right? We're internal, right? We're masking, okay? So they don't see us. On the outside, we look like we're perfectly put together. And so only the side effects get noticed. The anxiety, maybe it gets an SSRI, right? The burnout, they tell us, go take a spa day, drink some wine, get a new planner. And I'm using things that have actually been told to me and to my patients that sit in front of me. Okay. And guess what? We're left believing that the problem is us. We just need to try harder. You need to meal prep better. I don't know if meal prepping drives any of you crazy, but it's one of the wellness traits that drives me crazy with food sensitivities. I'm not going to meal prep, folks, right? But we need to try harder. We need to be less sensitive. We need to be more like everyone else. And these are not just external thoughts, these are also internal thoughts that we start talking to ourselves about, right? Especially because we didn't have a map, especially if nobody told us that this was neurodivergence, right? That our brain was just wired differently. We're comparing ourselves year after year after year to a brain that isn't like ours. Okay. And I want to name something that comes up time and time and time again Because a lot of you in this room may have a late diagnosis, right? Or again, you may not even be diagnosed yet. But when we get the diagnosis, we can feel extreme relief, but we also can feel grief. Okay. Because when it finally clicks, right, we think about the years that we've spent blaming ourselves, the version of our life that might have been or might have looked different if someone had seen this sooner. It's a lot. So I want you to know this. If that is a part where you're struggling right now, the grief is normal. It's valid and you're not alone in it. And that is the reason for rooms like this, right? We have to build a tribe. We have to build a community where we're talking about what's actually going on. Okay. This is a biology piece. What's actually happening in our brain, right? What are our hormones actually doing? And how does that affect us so that we can, right, take maps and use them to make plans, but also teach them down. Generational change, right? We don't want our daughters and our granddaughters and the girls that we love to struggle. Okay. Now, there's one more piece I need to give you before we go any further. And we're going to come back to the word in a few minutes, but the word is masking. Okay. So many of us have survived by masking. I want you to hear this. We've built an enormous invisible system of workarounds so that we look like everything is normal and it's fine. And the thing about masking is that it works, right? It works for years, right? Which is exactly why most people don't see our neurodivergence. Okay. Hold on to that word because in a few minutes, I'm going to tell you why masking eventually stops working and why, when it does, it can feel like you're falling apart. Okay. When you're actually not. Okay. So let's talk about what happens in midlife. Okay. Because if you are someone in your late 30s, 40s, or even 50s and feel like your brain suddenly stopped responding to things that used to work, I want to tell you this, that's true. Okay. It's not getting older. You don't have dementia. Nothing is wrong with you, right? It's true. Things just stop working. Okay. And interestingly, it's not one thing, right? It's a bunch of things and a bunch of hormones that create this whole problem. Okay, so let's walk through it. Come with me. We're going to walk along this little pond and chat about what the heck is actually really happening. When we talk about midlife and perimenopause, we hear a lot of words out in the zeitgeist, right? I'm actually happy that we're talking a lot about women's health. One thing we're not talking about, though, in the hormone realm is that hormones and hormone replacement and hormones and neurodivergence are very different than they are with neurotypicals. Every one of you in this room that is neurodivergent or think you are, whether you're on hormones or not, you know that you react differently to certain medications, right? We're more sensitive. This is one of the missing pieces in the world right now. We're doing a good job of saying, oh, HRT, it's great, and it is, right? It has its place, but it's very different for the neurodivergent brain. There's a lot of nuances around it. Okay, I want you to keep that. So we always hear the word estrogen, right? And estrogen is a god. She truly is. She's responsible for 400. Just take that in for a second. 400 reactions in the female body. Okay, and she matters enormously. Estrogen does really cool things, right? It's involved in our brain, in our mood, in our focus, in our memory. There's estrogen receptors on the prefrontal cortex of our brain, right? There's estrogen receptors in our muscles, in our bones. There's estrogen receptors in every single joint we have. There's estrogen receptors in our liver, right? And that's why we see different changes in blood work when we're estrogen is getting lower. Okay. So when estrogen starts to decline and fluctuate, remember 400 roles, the brain system that supports attention and motivation feel it. That prefrontal cortex, right? The CEO of our brain feels estrogen deficiency. So for a brain that was already carrying a heavier load, right? The ADHD, the autistic brain, that shift can hit us harder because there was less capacity there to begin with, right? It's not that we have lower dopamine, it's that we have this Harry Potter key that morphs, right? So we go to elicit a dopamine response and we go to put that receptor in, and that key says, ha ha, and it morphs, and we can't hit that dopamine. Right? So what do? We have urgency. We have all these things we do to try to access the dopamine. Insert lower estrogen. Lower estrogen actually does lower dopamine levels. So now you can see the problem that we have, right? We already couldn't access the dopamine that we had as much as we needed. Now we actually have lower levels of dopamine. Good luck, right? Now we really aren't accessing that dopamine like we should. And remember that executive functioning comes from that prefrontal cortex. Okay. But here's the thing, it's not just about estrogen. Okay, there's these other hormones called progesterone and testosterone that are of equal importance. And here's the true story about this. A lot of neurodivergent women actually have low progesterone, and this could be early in life, right? PMDD. 4 to 6% of the US has PMDD. 40% of them are neurodivergent. Most of the time, we can help that with progesterone. Okay? We've already had declining hormones. Progesterone can start to decline short of having PMDD or something else in our 30s. Testosterone, ladies, huge, right? Huge piece. We actually have more testosterone than we do estrogen. Now, they're measured in two different measurements, but when you make apples apples, we have 4 to 6 times more testosterone than estrogen. Guess what testosterone does? Works on the prefrontal cortex, right? And guess what? Another sad state of affairs for us women, which is testosterone can start declining in our late 20s. So think about that. Testosterone's already starting to decline, progesterone's already starting to decline. And then what happens? Then we lose estrogen, right? And there's the trifecta, right? But progesterone's shifting too. And what is progesterone? Progesterone is our Netflix and chill. Progesterone gets broken down to L-pregnenolone. L-pregnenolone works on the GABA receptors of our brain. It helps us relax. It helps us come down. It stops those ruminating thoughts that we have. Okay, that's going. What about testosterone? Huge role in our motivation and executive functioning. Not to mention, um, also for libido and also for our muscle mass and our bones. Huge. But from the neurodivergent perspective, testosterone, that piece, that CEO portion of our brain, it really can be a game changer for some people. Not everyone. Remember, there is nothing in medicine that works perfectly for everyone. That does not exist because we are all so individual. And that is a very important point. Okay. So what's happening in midlife is that trifecta. Progesterone's already going down, testosterone's already going down. Now we're losing the estrogen, and boom, right? Everything feels like the floor just came out from underneath us. And all of that was already working, right? This is all working on a brain that was already working harder than anyone ever realized, right? So I could spend an entire hour on how each one of these hormones interact with the neurodivergent brain. It's really, really that in depth. And in an intensive that I do, that's exactly what we do. We talk about estrogen and progesterone and testosterone one at a time. How each one shows up, right, in the body, focus, your mood, your sleep, your capacity, and how to replace those and what that looks like. How do you do estrogen replacement in a neurodivergent brain? Is there differences? Yes, there is, and we have to take those into account. But tonight, we're just going to walk away understanding one thing, right? That we're not making any of this up. We don't need to take a spa break, right? We don't need to drink wine. We need people in the system to understand us. And I want you to really understand that it's not just one thing, it's not just estrogen, right? It's a whole system shifting at one time, right? And nobody handed us the map. I don't know about you, but I didn't get any map. I didn't get any map that said, hey, Dr. Sarah, here's how your neurodivergent brain walks through perimenopause and menopause. I never received that. Maybe I was supposed to, but nobody gave it to me, right? Maybe it got lost in the mail. Okay. And I'm not the only one seeing this, okay? There was a survey of about 5,000 women with ADHD. 63% of those aged 45 and older said that ADHD had the greatest impact on their lives during perimenopause and menopause. You know that neurotypical women can feel like they have ADHD in perimenopause. Why? Because their dopamine is going down, right? And the estrogen is going down in that prefrontal cortex. Okay. So imagine what it's doing for our brains. Okay. Here's the way I think about it. Imagine you spend your whole life running almost with no margin. Every bit of your capacity was already spoken for, just to keep up with everything around you. And then midlife changes the ground underneath your feet. There was never any slack to absorb it, right? So it doesn't feel like a shift. It literally feels like everything got harder at that exact same moment, where our sleep is starting to not be good. Our focus is terrible. We can't do our jobs. Every single noise around us is annoying. I can't stand my coworker chewing next to me. I don't like bright lights. I'm irritated at everyone. I want to cry, right? I can't follow through on anything. I can't initiate a task, right? And I think one of the most important things to say is we even start not trusting ourselves because we're like, what is going on? And now I want to come back to that word, masking. Okay. Remember that huge, invisible system that we've built to hold this all together. Okay. Masking runs on capacity. And guess what? Masking is expensive. It costs energy every single day, whether we've noticed that or we haven't. And when midlife starts pulling away our capacity, that mask gets too heavy to hold up. I literally felt like my mask was just melting off my face and there was literally nothing I could do. I tried to like pull it back like it was silicone. There was nothing that I could, it was just crumbling down, melting down. I don't know if anyone else feels like that or has, but masking is expensive. Okay. So all of those strategies that we did well for 30, 40, 50 years, we literally do not have the cellular capacity to keep doing them. And here's really the kicker. This is where it can get really difficult. Because nobody around us, for the most part, ever saw that mask in the first place, right? So nobody understands why you suddenly seem to be struggling now with things you used to handle in your sleep. I've heard this like, wow, well, you just have it all together. And how could that bother you? Nothing bothers you. And nobody had the understanding of how much it cost me to keep that mask up. And when I did not have that cellular hormonal capacity to keep that mask up, they were like, who are you? Who is this person? And many women in midlife struggle with that. It might be with a partner, it may be at work. And we're already struggling with, we don't have as much capacity, right? Some weeks, right, we feel better. Some weeks we're not. If we're follicular, we feel great. If we're luteal, we may feel terrible. If we're ovulation, we could be passing out and we could have POTS and we're already dealing with all that. Now this mask comes down and people are like, who the heck are you? Okay. That is not us falling apart, although it feels like it. It feels like you're being ripped apart by the shreds. But it's a system that was never sustainable in the first place. And that system, like all do that are taxed, reaches its breaking point. Okay. That isn't failure, that is information. And here's the trap that so many of us fall into. So if we do get the courage to go get help, right, for hormones, right, guess what can happen? That conversation. So if we do, we get treated like neurotypical women, right? Okay. So we're watching all this stuff on TikTok and YouTube and everything. And it's like, okay, you need to get on estrogen. Estrogen's amazing, which she is. We already know that 400 roles in the female body. So we go, right? Maybe we go to a med spa, maybe we go to our OB. They don't know about our neurodivergence or have no idea that neurodivergent women need to have their hormone therapy done maybe a little bit differently. Not everyone, okay, but a lot of us. And so we go in and they're like, okay, here's your patch, here's your progesterone, here's your testosterone, goodbye, see ya. And then we go home and we take the progesterone and we feel like death and it's horrible and it's terrible and we have nightmares and then we call back and we're like, what is going on? Oh, well, that's the lowest dose we have. Like maybe you just can't take it, right? Or we try the estrogen, right? And we get headaches and things feel terrible. Well, that's 0.25. That's the lowest dose we have. Maybe you can't take hormones. Again, it's an us problem. Okay. That isn't true. Sometimes we need slower. Sometimes, believe it or not, in neurodivergence, we need double the dose, right? So remember, our bodies don't like the delta. They don't like the difference, especially with progesterone. So progesterone, sometimes 100 can be extremely unstabilizing in neurodivergence. But if I give you 400, you feel good because those receptors are saturated. GABA is not fluctuating at steady state and you feel amazing, right? Sometimes we only need 100. Sometimes I can put a neurodivergent woman on 0.25 of estrogen and she does great. Sometimes I literally have to start drop by drop. Okay, put on a little drop today, put on another. Okay, let's add two now. 5 days later, let's add three. And that is okay. But a lot of medicine doesn't understand that. So then again, what happens? Right? We're the failures. It doesn't work for us. We can't take HRT, right? Or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe you go to get help for your neurodivergence and they don't even acknowledge the fact that hormones are a problem here. I see this too. I see both sides of this every single day in my practice. Right now, you're at the psychiatrist or whoever, right? And they're treating your neurodivergence, but they don't connect that this could be hormonal or has anything to do with hormones. Two separate rooms, two separate conversations, and we're the ones here in the middle, right? Holding both at once, and we're trying to say, what the heck? What do we do? Right? The system isn't putting it together. Right. And honestly, that gap, that exact gap, is why I care about this the most. Because we can take hormones. Hormones can be beneficial to us. Are they beneficial for everyone? No, nothing in the world is. But we deserve precision guided care. We deserve to have clinicians and physicians who understand hormones and longevity and neurodivergence, right? We need both of them. And that's what we deserve. Here's the shift that I want you to leave with tonight. Almost every piece of advice that has ever been handed was built on one hidden assumption, right? And you may feel this way, you may not feel this way, but that the goal is to make our brain behave more like a neurotypical brain. Okay, folks, just push harder, be more consistent, okay? Follow through, just go to the gym, just work out, follow those routines like everyone else, meal prep, okay? And when that doesn't work, guess what happens? Now we feel like we're the problem again. However, consistency assumes that you feel the same from day to day. I don't know about you and your neurodivergence, but do you feel the same from day to day? Meal prepping assumes that you don't have food sensitivities, that maybe you don't have only six safe foods, right? Or tactile sensitivity. Like, I'm not touching raw chicken, folks. I'm not meal prepping. Okay? The world is trying to do good, talking about all these things. But again, we're kind of getting left behind because these things don't necessarily work for us. Now, they work in principality, right? Movement is good. Yes. It may not be you and I going to the gym because of the bright lights and the people all around and the clanking and oh my gosh, like dropping barbells, right? That type, we may not be going to the gym, or we may need to go at 5 o'clock in the morning or at 8 o'clock at night, or we may need to make a home gym, right? The principles of wellness are the same for us. But the way and the things that people say are not going to work for our brains necessarily. Okay. And we're not the problem. Okay. The goal was never to fix our brain. Okay. What if the goal was to stop fighting it and start building our life around how it actually works? Okay, great, right? That sounds awesome. And it's not easy. Nothing about this is easy. Okay. I never want anyone to think I say, just do this and all is grand. No, that's not real life. Okay. But we do have to stop trying to build a life around a brain that is not ours, right? We have to embrace the brain that we have and start trying to find the things that work for us. Okay. So listen, I want to give you a small, real piece where you can kind of start with tonight and for this week, since it's Monday, the beginning of the week, something you can actually use tomorrow. So for the next week, I don't want you to try to fix anything. No, I just want you to notice one thing. When in your day is your brain actually on? And I want to caveat this actually can change throughout the month. So if you are perimenopausal or still cycling, right, not menopause, still cycling, this can be very different from one phase, luteal, to follicular, right, to ovulation. So really, we should be tracking this over a month. But in this week, no matter where you are, what cycle that is, if you're cycling, and then if you're not cycling anymore, if you're menopausal, when in your day does your brain actually on? Okay. Most of us have a window. For some of us, it's 2 hours after coffee. Maybe for a lot of people, actually, it's late at night when the house is finally quiet. Just think and pay attention to that window where focus is genuinely easier. And here's what most of us do, and not on purpose, but we waste that window on an email and laundry and admin. And then we try to do our toughest, most important thinking later when we're already running on empty. So this week, just find the window. Okay. Is it that 2 hours in the morning after coffee, which is that's when mine is. I work out in the morning, I get my coffee, I drink my electrolytes, and I'm pretty good till about 1 o'clock. That's my window. Okay. And when you find this window this week, protect one small piece of it for something that actually matters to you. Not, hear me out, not something that needs to get done. Okay. But something that matters to you, whether that's you going into the sauna, whether it's you reading a book, whether it's you educating yourself, whether it's you listening to a YouTube, whether it's knitting or art, something that actually matters to you. That is what it looks like to work with your brain instead of against it. One little window at a time, right? I don't know if you've tried to change a lot of things at once, but it doesn't really work. Okay. At least not for most of us. Now, that's one strategy for one piece of one day, that I can already feel some of you thinking, like, okay, I don't need one tip. I need the whole thing, right? I need the whole darn plan, Dr. Sarah. So that's what we're going to talk about, right? So I gave you a little bit of the why, right? Why our brain is kind of falling apart, why we feel like it's falling apart, and that hormones can play a role, right? There is other hormones too. We only named three, but we didn't talk about thyroid and inflammation and cortisol and all these things that also play a role. Okay. We just talked about why your brain works the way it does, why midlife, why nobody noticed that for the most part, why midlife made everything harder, and why our old strategies that were working for us for a long time stopped working, right? That's the map. But what you don't have is the plan, right? The actual personalized step-by-step plan. And here's the thing. Personalized is a huge word, right? And it's very important, especially in neurodivergence. I truly believe that everyone, and especially for women in women's health, should have a personalized plan. I made an Instagram the other day that was like, your neighbor's hormone plan isn't going to work for you. Right. And that's so true, even without a neurodivergent brain. But what your neighbor does isn't going to be or work the same for you. Everybody really does need a personalized plan. Okay. And one that's built around our brains and our life. That second part is so important, our life, right? Because I can build the best plans in the world for you, but if it isn't realistic, if it isn't within the life that you live, it's not going to work, right? And we're not going to do it. Maybe we do it for day one or two, just like the gym, right? In January, right? But if you are noise sensitive and you hear that clacking, smacking, people chewing, sweaty gym guys, lights on you. You're not going to get past January 10th, right? And the same thing is true for this. Okay? So that's why I created this amazing room. Um, oh wow, see my neurodivergence, I couldn't even get through the right slides, ladies. Forgive me. Um, I created a really cool room. It's called the Midlife Hits a Neurodivergent Brain. It's live. It's 4 hours. If you don't like me, don't come because you don't want to spend 4 hours with me. But it's really for neurodivergent women in midlife who want a plan that actually works for their brain, their body, and their real life. It's not generic hormone advice. We're literally going to go through all of the hormones, right? And others than the ones we talked about. And what that really looks like, right? How do we replace them if we choose to? We may choose not to, and that's okay. How do we really do that? Another cool thing that we do is we talk about tough conversations. Um, and that's pretty tough, right? So when the mask does come off, what do we say to our employer? What do we say to our spouse that's known us for 20 years and seen us a certain way? And we work on that together. It's not just like, oh, this is the script that you say. No, we get together as women, right? And say, what is it that you're struggling? I can give some scripts, some I don't say scripts, but some outlines of what we should do, and then we work through it together. And even if you come on the intensive and you never speak the entire time, which I've had people do, and that's totally fine, what you leave away with is hearing your tribe, right? Women in your tribe, in your community, talking about real life issues, what they're dealing with at work, or what they're dealing with their spouse, or what they're dealing with personally, and how we navigate those together. Okay? How we navigate those together. We're all in one room, right? And what's really cool is I built this GPT. So you have to have chat for it, and if you like that. But I built this neurodivergent tracker because I wanted an easy way. I actually initially built it for my clients because I wanted an easy way for them to be able to track things and for me to be able to see patterns over time. So all they have to do is talk into it, right? Oh, I feel like crap. Oh, I have no, reserve. I'm very tired, this and that. And then at the end of a month or two, we can say, hey, I'm going to see Dr. Sarah. Give me the rundown of what's been going on. And we can see pattern predictability. And we can say, wow, yeah, 10 days before your cycle, things are going haywire. Let's focus there, right? But also a really easy way to keep track of the stuff that we're doing, right? I feel good. I'm working out and I did this and this worked. Because in the moment, sometimes we forget that, right? We forget what worked and what didn't. So this is a nice way to keep track of that. That's really simple and really easy. Okay. So we spend 4 hours together. We talk about what's actually happening, connect hormones. We talk a lot about the nervous system, the sympathetic spiral of doom, I call it. We talk about energy and executive functioning, where you can build a real week around your actual capacity and how that can change through the month. And then we talk about identity and relationships and those really cool communication pieces. And that's where we work through scripts together, things we can say and how we can express. We do a doctor's office one, which is also really pretty powerful because as I started this with, a lot of us have a lot of trauma there, right? There's a lot of trauma. In hour 4, we do something cool, which is where we come together and we map out your 90-day reset plan. Not mine, I map my own. You map your own. We do it together with each other, right? And we get to walk out of the door with that, which is pretty cool. So that being said, you're not weak, you're not lazy, you're not too much. You're really not. You may have simply gone too long without the right explanation. Okay. So if you want to come with me, come. Before we do the Q&A, there's a QR code. There's no obligation. This is just getting you on the list. We haven't even opened the doors yet to our August intensive, but get on the list. There'll be bonuses. There'll be cool stuff. Get on if you have any interest. If not, that's okay too. We're here when you're ready. We do this every month. And I opened by telling you you weren't too much. I'm going to end by telling you that I want you to come build a plan with me. I think that would be really cool. And I'm excited for that. I really thank each and every one of you for coming and taking your time with me. because it's really important. And um, we don't talk about these things enough, and it's shameful sometimes to talk about them. And I understand that. So I appreciate you being vulnerable. I appreciate you coming. And I'm going to check the Q&A. Yes, there will be a replay. Um, okay. And then someone said, I think the combination of these together is really essential. Can you not scan the screen? Does it not show you that? If it doesn't, that's okay. Janice, we'll send it. I'll send the link out in the replay too. Okay. I'll send the link out into the replay. But remember that the problem isn't us. You're very welcome. The problem is just that we don't have the systems, or we didn't have the information, and we were overlooked or mislooked, and we can move forward from that, right? We can take hormones if we want, right? If we want, we don't have to, right? We can have an optimized system. We are able to get out of sympathetic spiral of doom. This isn't hopeless. There is a lot of things we can do when we work with the right people and surround ourselves with that right community. So I appreciate you. You'll get the replay, like I said. If you have any other questions or anything, you can ask there. I really appreciate you and your time tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again. So I'm here if you need anything. If not, you have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.